I was pulling a tray of blueberry muffins out of the oven when my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. An Oregon area code, but not anyone in my contacts. I almost let it go to voicemail. I'd been getting those Medicare scam calls all week, but something made me pick up. Ma'am, I'm sorry to disturb you. This is Deputy Harmon with the Clatsop County Sheriff's Office. Are you related to a woman named Sylvia? My heart dropped straight through the kitchen floor. Sylvia is my daughter. She's 34 years old, 7 months pregnant with her first child, and she had driven up to Astoria that weekend to visit her husband's family. I had not heard from her since Friday. Yes, I said, she's my daughter. What happened? She's been transported to Columbia Memorial Hospital. She's stable, but she's asking for you. Ma'am, I'd recommend you come as soon as you can. He didn't tell me anything else over the phone. I didn't even take off my apron. I grabbed my keys and my purse off the hook by the door and I drove 90 minutes up Route 30 talking to God the whole way there, asking Him to please, please let my daughter and that baby be all right. When I walked into the emergency room, Sylvia was in a curtained bay with an IV in her arm and a fetal monitor strapped around her belly. Her lip was split. Her left cheekbone was swollen so badly her eye was nearly shut. There were bruises around her wrists like she had been grabbed and held down. I put my hand over my mouth because I didn't want her to see me fall apart. She turned her head when she heard me, and she started crying before I could even reach her. I held her face in my hands as gently as I could, and I just kept saying, I'm here. I'm here, baby. I'm right here. It took a long time before she could speak. The nurse gave us privacy, and I sat on the edge of her bed and held her hand and waited. They left me on the trail, she finally said. What do you mean they left you? She closed her eyes. His mother, and Gail. Gail is my son-in-law Philip's sister. She's 31, unmarried, and she had never, not once in 3 years, been kind to my daughter. I had noticed it. I had kept my mouth shut because Sylvia asked me to. We went hiking Saturday morning. Philip had to stay back. He said he had a work call. So it was just me and them. She paused to breathe. I slipped on a wet rock crossing the creek. I fell hard. I couldn't get up right away. I was scared about the baby and I was crying and I told them I needed help. I needed to call Philip. She stopped. And, I said, his mother looked at me and said she wasn't going to call anyone. She said I was being dramatic. She said I was being dramatic. She said, Sylvia's voice dropped to almost nothing. She said women like me were always looking for someone to take care of us. I went very still. Women like you, I repeated. Sylvia nodded. She didn't have to explain what that meant. I knew what that woman meant. I had suspected it from the first Thanksgiving, when Philip's mother, Lorraine, had looked at my daughter across the table with that particular kind of smile that never quite reached her eyes, the smile that said, You don't belong here. My daughter is black. Philip is white. Lorraine had made her feelings known in 100 small ways over 3 years. Comments about Sylvia's hair, about the food she cooked, about the neighborhood she'd grown up in. Always deniable, always just barely within the range of you're being too sensitive. They left, Sylvia said. They just walked back to the car and left me there. She had lain on that trail for 2.5 hours, 7 months pregnant, alone in the Tillamook State Forest, with a twisted ankle and a bruised hip and no cell signal. A retired school teacher named Agnes was hiking with her husband, and they found Sylvia trying to crawl toward the trailhead. Agnes's husband carried my daughter on his back to their car and drove her straight to the hospital. I sat there and I listened to all of it. I held my daughter's hand and I did not say one word about what I was feeling, because what I was feeling was not something you could say out loud in a hospital room. Philip arrived around 8 o'clock that night. He came in looking pale and rattled, and he went to Sylvia and kissed her forehead and said, thank God," over and over. I watched him. I watched his face. I was trying to decide what I believed. I stepped out into the hallway while the doctor came in to do a check. A few minutes later, Philip came out to find me. "Darlene," he said. "That's my name. Darlene May Hutchins, 63 years old, retired county records clerk, grandmother to be. I am so sorry. I had no idea they would. Did you know your mother doesn't think my daughter belongs in your family?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. That told me something. "She's old-fashioned," he said. "She grew up in a different time." "I've talked to her old-fashioned," I said. I kept my voice low and even because we were in a hospital hallway and I was raised right. "Your mother left my pregnant daughter alone on a mountain trail. She left her there, Philip, because of who she is." "I know." He rubbed his face with both hands. "I know, and I'm going to handle it." "You've been handling it for 3 years," I said. "How's that been working out?" I went back inside to my daughter. The baby was fine. A girl. They were going to name her June. The doctors kept Sylvia overnight for observation, and I slept in the recliner chair beside her bed, the same way I used to sit beside her bed when she was sick as a little girl, and I didn't want her to wake up alone. In the morning, while Sylvia was sleeping, I stepped outside and called my brother. His name is Clifton. He's 67, retired from the Portland Police Bureau after 28 years. He lives 20 minutes from me in Beaverton. He is the kind of man who does not raise his voice or waste words, and the only time I've ever seen him truly angry was when something hurt someone he loved. I told him everything. I told him about the trail, and Agnes, and the fetal monitor, and Lorraine's face in Sylvia's telling of it. That cold, deliberate choice to walk away. Clifton was quiet for a long moment. "Darlene," he said, "you know this isn't something we can let go." "I know. You want to handle this right." "I want to handle this the way Daddy would have," I said. "Our father, Reginald Hutchins, grew up in Alabama in the 1940s. He came to Oregon in 1962 with $12 and a trade certificate, and he built a life here through sheer, stubborn dignity. He used to tell us, 'You don't fight dirty, but you fight smart, and you fight all the way to the end.' He passed 11 years ago. Not a week goes by I don't think of something he said." "All right," Clifton said. "Let me make some calls." What I did not know, what Sylvia herself had not known until she was lying in that hospital bed going over everything in her mind, was that this had happened before. Philip's first wife, a woman named Teresa, had left him after 18 months of marriage. Teresa was Filipina. She had told Philip at the time that his family had made her feel like a stranger in her own home. Philip had dismissed it. He had told her she was imagining things. He had chosen his family's version of events over hers. Sylvia found this out because she called Teresa. They had met exactly once, briefly, awkwardly, at a mutual friend's birthday party 2 years ago, but Sylvia had held on to her number on instinct, the way women sometimes do when they sense they might need a witness someday. Teresa answered on the second ring. I sat beside my daughter's hospital bed and I listened to half of that phone call. I listened to Sylvia say, "It happened to you too, didn't it?" and then go silent for a long time while Teresa talked. When Sylvia hung up, her expression was something I don't have a precise word for. It was grief and clarity at the same time. She said Lorraine once told her that Philip needed to be with someone from a compatible background. Sylvia said. She said she used to wonder if she was being paranoid. She said she's glad she's not the only one. I took my daughter's hand. "You were never paranoid," I said, "and you were never alone." Clifton had called a friend of his, a woman named Vera, who was a retired family law attorney. Vera was not practicing anymore, but she knew every attorney in the Tri-County area, and she knew exactly who we needed to talk to. The attorney we hired was a man named Douglas Eames. He was 55, sharp, unhurried, and he listened to everything without interrupting once. When we finished, he folded his hands on his desk and told us what we were looking at. What had happened on that trail was, at minimum, criminal abandonment. Sylvia was a vulnerable person, visibly pregnant, injured, without cell service, in a remote location. Lorraine and Gail had left her there knowingly. Oregon statute was specific on this. There was also the question of whether this constituted reckless endangerment, given that the fall and subsequent exposure could have caused early labor or worse. The baby's life had been at risk. They will say it was a misunderstanding, Douglas told us. They will say she refused help. They will say she told them she was fine. Agnes and her husband are willing to give statements, I said. They were there. They saw the condition my daughter was in. Douglas nodded slowly. That helps considerably. We filed a report with the Clatsop County Sheriff's Office. We filed a formal complaint requesting a criminal investigation. We documented everything: the medical records, the fetal monitoring strips, the photographs of Sylvia's injuries, Agnes's written account, Teresa's statement about the pattern of behavior within the family. Philip did not fight us, to his credit, and I say that meaning it because I did look for it. He did not take his family's side. He was cooperative. He gave a statement. I think seeing Sylvia in that hospital bed had done something to him that 3 years of smaller moments had not been able to do. I think it had made things undeniable in a way he could no longer manage around. What I felt about Philip was complicated. I did not hate him. I thought he was a man who had spent his whole life taking the path of least resistance with his family, and that path had cost my daughter something she could never fully get back. Whether their marriage survived was between them and God. It was not my call to make. What was my call was to make sure Lorraine and Gail understood there were consequences. Real ones, legal ones, not a hard conversation over the holidays, not a letter Philip wrote and then softened, actual, documented legal consequences. The investigation took 11 weeks. During those 11 weeks, my daughter came to stay with me. She slept in her old room, the one with the yellow curtains she'd picked out when she was 13. I made her breakfast every morning and drove her to her prenatal appointments and sat with her in the evenings when she couldn't sleep, which was often. We talked about a lot of things during those weeks. We talked about my mother and father. We talked about what it had been like for me raising her and her brother alone after my husband passed 20 years ago. We talked about what she wanted for June. I want her to know she belongs everywhere she goes, Sylvia said one night. We were sitting on the back porch. It was October, cool enough for sweaters. I don't want her to spend one single day of her life wondering if she's enough. She won't, I said, because she'll know where she comes from. Sylvia looked at me. Your grandfather built his life from nothing in a state that wasn't built for him, I said. Your grandmother worked double shifts at the hospital for 30 years so your mother could go to college. There's nothing ordinary about where you come from, baby. That is what June inherits, not what anyone else decides her blood is worth. Sylvia leaned her head on my shoulder the way she used to do when she was small. We stayed out there until it got too cold. In November, the Clatsop County District Attorney's Office filed charges. Lorraine was charged with criminal mistreatment in the second degree. Gail was charged with the same. Under Oregon law, ORS 163-200, criminal mistreatment in the second degree applies when a person with a duty of care, or who has assumed a duty of care through their conduct, knowingly fails to provide care to a vulnerable person, resulting in harm. The DA's office determined there was sufficient evidence to proceed. I was not in the room when Lorraine found out. I was told about it secondhand by Douglas. He said she had been shocked. He said she had wept and said she'd had no idea things would go this far. I thought about that for a long time afterward. The particular shock of a person who has spent years behaving badly in ways they believed would never be held accountable. The genuine surprise of someone who had always been able to smooth things over, minimize, reframe. The tears that come not from remorse but from suddenly finding a wall where there had always been open space before. I did not feel satisfaction exactly. What I felt was closer to correct. This was correct. This was how things should work. You do not leave a pregnant woman alone on a mountain because you have decided her blood is not good enough. You do not do that and then have Sunday dinner and wait for everyone to forget. June Eleanor was born on December 2nd at 11:47 in the morning. She weighed 7 pounds and 4 ounces. She had Sylvia's nose and Philip's ears and a full head of dark hair that stood straight up, no matter what anyone did to it. She looked at me from the moment they put her in my arms with these enormous, serious dark eyes, like she was trying to decide whether I was trustworthy. "Hello," I told her. "I'm your grandmother. I have been waiting a very long time for you." Clifton came to the hospital that afternoon. He stood in the doorway of the room for a moment, looking at Sylvia in the bed and then at me holding June, and something moved across his face that I recognized as grief and love mixed together, the feeling of seeing your family continue after everything that tried to stop it. He came and sat beside me, and I handed him the baby. He held her with those big, careful hands the way he used to hold Sylvia when she was newborn, 34 years ago. He didn't say anything for a while. Then he said quietly, "Daddy would have loved to see this." "He does see it," I said. Clifton smiled. He didn't argue. Lorraine pleaded no contest in February. She was sentenced to 18 months of probation, 200 hours of community service, and mandatory participation in a restorative justice program. Gail received a similar sentence. No prison time. Douglas had told us from the beginning to be realistic about what the sentencing guidelines permitted for second-degree charges. I had wanted more. I will be honest about that. There was a part of me that wanted something harder, something that would match the weight of what had been taken. Those hours Sylvia spent on that trail, the fear she had felt for her baby, the years of small cruelties that had come before it. You cannot sentence someone for the years. You can only work with what the law allows. But the record exists. The conviction exists. The rain cannot rewrite what happened or explain it away or make Sylvia feel like she imagined it. That part is permanent. That part I am at peace with. Sylvia and Philip are still married. I know that surprises some people when I say it. They went through a period of serious separation. Philip moved into an apartment for 2 months in the winter, and they went to counseling, together and separately. I stayed out of it. That was the hardest thing I did through all of this, honestly. Staying out of my daughter's marriage, not pushing, not editorializing, just making it clear that whatever she chose, I would be standing right beside her. What she chose was to try. She told me why one evening in March when she came for dinner and we sat at the kitchen table after June had fallen asleep in the carrier on my chest. "He showed up," Sylvia said. "When it counted, he could have defended them, and he didn't. He could have told me I was overreacting, and he didn't." She turned her coffee cup in her hands. "He's not his family, Mama. He's making different choices." "Then I support that," I said, and I meant it, because I raised my daughter to be a woman who makes clear-eyed decisions, not a woman who makes decisions based on what other people think she should do. If she had decided to leave, I would have supported that too. What I care about is that she knows her own mind and that no one, not her husband, not his family, not the world, ever makes her feel like her judgment cannot be trusted. That is what I was fighting for on that trail. Not just her physical safety, her right to be believed. June is 5 months old now. She has discovered her hands, which she studies with the same serious expression she gave me in the delivery room, like they are a very interesting problem she intends to solve. Sylvia comes over on Sundays. Sometimes Clifton comes too, and the four of us sit in the backyard while June lies on her blanket in the grass and squints up at the maple tree like she can't quite figure out what all those leaves are doing. Last Sunday, Clifton brought a photograph. It was one I hadn't seen in years. Our father as a young man, standing in front of the house in Beaverton he had saved up to buy, squinting into the sun with that particular expression he always had in photographs, half proud, half like he was daring the world to say something. Clifton propped it up on the table so June could see it. "That's your great-grandfather," I told her, even though she's 5 months old and has no idea what I'm saying. "He built something from nothing. He did it with his hands and his mind, and he never let one single person tell him what he was worth." June looked at the photograph very seriously. Then she grabbed my finger and held on. I thought, there it is. There is the whole thing, right there. In that grip, that is my father's stubbornness and my mother's determination and every generation of this family that ever survived something they weren't supposed to survive. Lorraine called it dirty blood, but what it looks like from where I'm sitting, with my granddaughter's hand around my finger in the October sunlight, is something more like gold. I've thought a lot about what Lorraine must have told herself on the drive back from that trail. I think she told herself it wasn't a big deal. I think she told herself Sylvia was young and strong and would be fine. I think she told herself, the way people who do cruel things always do, that what she had done wasn't really that bad. That's the thing about cruelty that hides behind contempt. It doesn't feel like cruelty to the person doing it. It feels like a reasonable response to someone they've already decided doesn't deserve full consideration. Lorraine hadn't decided to endanger my daughter on that particular Saturday morning. She had made that decision slowly, over 3 years. Every time she looked at Sylvia and chose to see less than what was there. The trail was just the day that decision had weight behind it. What I've come to understand, and it took me a long time to get here because I am not a naturally patient woman, is that people who operate that way are not punished by the universe in some grand, dramatic fashion. They are punished by the ordinary accumulation of what they've chosen. Lorraine will spend the rest of her life as a woman who left her pregnant daughter-in-law alone on a mountain. That is who she is now. The probation ends. The community service hours get logged and signed off on. But the fact of what she did doesn't go anywhere. It lives in every room she walks into. It lives in the face of her granddaughter, who will grow up knowing the story. That is consequence enough for me. Not because I am especially forgiving, but because I have watched long enough to know that the most lasting damage a person like that sustains is the loss of the story they told themselves about who they were. What I want June to understand someday, when she's old enough to hear all of this, is that her grandmother did not fight because she was angry. I mean, I was angry. I won't pretend otherwise. There were nights I couldn't sleep for the anger, but anger wasn't what drove the decision to hire Douglas, to file the report, to sit in that sheriff's office and give a clear, documented account of every piece of evidence we had. What drove that was something quieter. It was the understanding that if we let it go, we would be teaching Sylvia that what happened to her was acceptable, that the world had decided and we had agreed that her safety was negotiable. I was not willing to teach my daughter that. My father didn't teach us to fight back because he was a bitter man. He was one of the least bitter people I've ever known. He taught us because he understood that the alternative, accepting less than what you're owed, staying quiet to keep the peace, swallowing the evidence of your own eyes, has a cost that compounds. It doesn't stay contained to the moment you swallow it. It spreads. It changes how you carry yourself. It changes what you believe you deserve. Sylvia deserved to be believed. June deserves to be raised by a mother who was believed. That's the whole thing, really. That's what all of it was for. I don't know what the right word is for what I felt the morning the charges were filed. It wasn't triumph. It was more like a door closing on something that needed to be closed, like finishing a piece of work. My father built things with his hands, his whole life, and he used to say there was a particular feeling when the last piece went into place. Not excitement, just rightness. The satisfaction of a thing done as it should be done. That's what I felt. Rightness. And then I drove home and held my granddaughter and watched her grab at a sunbeam coming through the window with those small, serious hands, like she intended to take hold of the whole world. I think she just might.